It's a sad day, but with trade deadlines approaching, this will be our last buy low video of the season, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully we are able to help you out. I mean, last week we absolutely crushed it. Our buy low candidates started off with Devonta Smith. Essentially, we were looking at the historical splits that you had with and without Dallas Goedert, and we were saying, oh, okay, well, yeah, in games Goedert doesn't play in, Smith does have that increased role, averaging about an additional 1.5 if you're looking at a PPR format and a target and a half from a per game perspective. Then we talked about Justin Fields. Looking at Justin Fields, we were essentially saying, okay, back-to-back weeks now, he's going to be a buy low guy when he does come back in. He is going to have all the rushing upside in the world. Even if he's not a good real-life quarterback, he can still be viable in fantasy given his legs. He had 100 rushing yards this past week. Evan Ingram as well. We are essentially making the bet on the bounce-back Jacksonville Jaguars. We bet on the wrong guy, but I still stand by. I think that Evan Ingram is a mid-tight end one rest of season based off the consistent target volume we've had all season. Talked about Tony Pollard a bit, essentially just looking at the Dallas Cowboys offense being one of the best offenses in the NFL and looking at the fact that Tony Pollard has had that consistent workload all season, both as a rusher and a receiver. And then last but not least, we had Zach Charbonnet for like the third week straight as a buy low candidate, looking at his receiving usage, the expanded role that he had in Seattle, and the hidden upside that Charbonnet possesses if you were to see that injury to Kenneth Walker, where Charbonnet would step into a 3-down workload. So last week, honestly, I felt like we hit on a considerable amount of those guys. Now, really, there aren't too many of those players that we could say are buy low candidates anymore with their value popping. I do want to go over and revisit what we have going on in Philadelphia, however, because with Dallas Goedert, the initial report was, okay, he's going to go on the IR. Dallas Goedert is going to miss 4 weeks, blah, blah, blah. Then they had the bye. Then going into this past week, Dallas Goedert dodges the IR. So, I mean, if you're looking at this, we're most likely going to be expecting a week 13, week 14 return for Dallas Goedert. Great news if you do have Dallas Goedert, which, trust me, I drafted way too much Goedert this season. And if you're looking at where he's at on flockfantasy.com right now, he's fallen to 117 in the community rankings. This is directly after George Pickens. This is directly before Jordan Love. And 100%, if the initial injury was correct that Goedert was going to miss the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, he would belong down here. But based on the updated timetable, I think that this is a tight end that maybe you can go out there and pick up as a tight end 2 and hope that you get tight end 1 production for the fantasy football playoffs. Now, specifically the teams where you'd be looking to trade for Dallas Goedert are the teams that you are locked and loaded into the playoffs. Maybe that roster that's currently 7-4. Maybe that roster that's 8-3. I mean, if you're sitting with a record like that, I would say Goddard's a prime candidate, especially if you had a tight end like Mark Andrews. Now, if you're going to be looking at a team that's 4-7, if you're going to be looking at a team that's maybe 5-6, you have no business trading for a player that's not going to play over the next few weeks. Going back and looking at what we've had from Goedert so far this season, really outside of the first 2 weeks of the season, he had been extremely consistent. Like the last 5 weeks that we had from Dallas Goedert, he goes out 117 receiving yards, receiving touchdown. 5 receptions, 42 receiving yards, 77 receiving yards in the receiving touchdown, 36 receiving yards, 50 receiving yards. Just that consistent mid-tight end 1. That's in a good offense, so you can expect that every once in a while he will go out there and actually find the end zone. So obviously he's not like a super exciting player. And I'm not going to be telling you on this video, oh yeah, let's go through and let's buy Travis Etienne. Obviously, you can't afford Travis Etienne, right? So I'll be looking at some cheaper options. At the very end of the video, we'll talk about an expensive discounted stud. But going over to our next guy, I mean, talk about boring. We will have Drake London. Just looking outside the top 100 players in the flockfantasy.com community rankings, Drake London's currently at 104. He is directly behind Rashee Rice, directly behind Jacoby Myers, and right before Romeo Doubs and Taysom Hill. And in this range, I think that London's a fine pickup. Now, London's not going to be a player that you're trading for in every situation on every roster. Full transparency, if you're playing in a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, you have literally no business going out there and trading for Drake London. London will never make a difference in a format like that. Even if you were to buy him here at a wide receiver 4 price tag, which is what his current price is, even if you were to go out there and say be the wide receiver 22, he still doesn't impact your ability to win fantasy games in a format like that. Where you'd be looking to pick up Drake London on the cheap would be essentially a league where wide receiver depth actually matters. That's going to be your 12-team format where you start 3 wide receivers. That's going to be in your 14-team league. That's going to be in your 16-team league. Because while Drake London 100% has been one of the most disappointing players so far this season for where he was drafted, if you remove the first week of the season, I mean, still, he's been okay, right? 67 receiving yards, receiving touchdown, 31, 28 in a touchdown, 78, 125, 54, 55, 36. Not going to come out here and act like this is someone that's penciled in to be a top 12 guy or even a top 24 player. More so, I think that he's a safe wide receiver 3 in a league where you could possibly use some depth, and you could get him at a wide receiver 4 price tag at this time. Now let's go over to a running back that's at 100 overall in the community rankings. And here we are going to be looking at Alexander Madison. Now, with Madison, this is a player that has some red flags and some clear limitations. The first thing being is Alexander Madison has been one of the least efficient running backs in the entire NFL this season. If you go and look at his fantasy points versus expected fantasy points, Alexander Madison has been at the very bottom. I mean, right now you're looking at Madison as a top 5 running back in expected fantasy points according to PFF. Now, I think the primary reason why Alexander Madison has been significantly under his fantasy point expectation is because he's not a good player. There's a reason he is this low in the rankings. There's a reason people are this out on him. But if you look at this kind of volume, since the Cam Akers injury, this is someone that we can pencil in each and every week to go out there and see 15, 16, 17, 18 carries. He had 18 carries against Denver this week. If you're just looking at the box score, it's not going to be great for the week prior, but remember, he left with a concussion. So in reality, I mean, I think you can safely pencil him for the 15 carries. The issue is he's not going to catch the ball. I mean, with Joshua Dobbs can go out there and run it, and we know that quarterbacks with the ability to rush the football typically are going to have lower checkdown rates overall. So if you're playing in a full BBR format, probably shouldn't be interested in Alexander Madison. I mean, over the past 3 weeks since you had Joshua Dobbs, Alexander Madison has had 2 targets every single week. But if you're playing in that non-PPR format, I think that's where you can pick up Alexander Madison as an RB3 that most likely can be an RB2 going forward just based off of volume, and volume. Now, let's go over to an offense that has been kind of clicking, but these skill positional guys haven't really done anything. Let's look at Arizona, and I want to be resetting the baseline of what you have with James Conner and Hollywood Brown here. I mean, if you go over and look at their underdog pick'ems this week, you have James Conner at 61.5 rushing yards. You have Hollywood Brown at 53.5 receiving yards. Just to give you a baseline on what this rushing yardage total is, I mean, this is ahead of Bijan Robinson, who they only have at 49.5. This is ahead of Rachaad White, who they only have at 49.5 rushing yards as well. So we know that James Conner is going to be a running back that's involved as a rusher. I think pretty much everybody understands that. But also we have to remember that James Conner will see some looks as a receiving back as well. And side note, if you wanted to go through and look at the more than 61.5 rushing yards for James Conner on Underdog, not going to fault you for it. You can find that link in the description in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And they're hooking you up with a few specials for Thanksgiving, starting off with a CMC more than less than half a total yard with promo code FLOCK. But if we're looking at James Conner and we are going through and mapping out what we have had with and without Kyler Murray over the past 2 seasons, it's a little weird in that you would think that in games where Kyler would play, you'd almost have the same instance of what you're looking at with Alexander Madison and Joshua Dobbs, where Kyler Murray is the quarterback that can go out there and run the ball right, so you're just not going to see a high checkdown rate overall. But the reality of the situation is James Conner isn't a phenomenal receiver. He's only sitting at 31 receiving yards so far this season. But last year, he was a very capable receiver. And I don't need James Conner to be a great receiving running back. I just need him to be capable, because if you look at how this offense should perform going forward, I mean, based off the implied team totals they've had over the past 2 weeks with the healthy Kyler Murray, Las Vegas is baking in that this is going to be a much better offense than it has been so far this season. And if you're looking at the price point for James Conner, it's very reasonable, where right now he's alongside Zach Charbonnet, Joshua Dobbs, Zay Flowers. I would love to sell Flowers for James Conner. Hell, y'all even know that Zach Charbonnet is a running back that we've been pumping as that buy low candidate for weeks now, but that was whenever he was valued as a throw-in, right? If you ask me, Mason, would you rather have Zach Charbonnet or James Conner? Knowing that Kenneth Walker's coming back later in the year, I'd say probably go ahead and give me James Conner, the running back that had 58 total targets last year and 183 carries. So we know that he will start seeing some balls out of the backfield as a receiver sometime soon. I want to get in before it's too late. And going over to Hollywood Brown, I just want to check in because we talked about him last week with the panic video, essentially saying, okay, yeah, first week back for Kyler. You have 1 reception, 28 receiving yards for Hollywood. I understand why people are nervous. Well, this week he has like 12 total yards, 18 receiving yards, and -6 rushing yards. So yeah, I think that people are going to be, again, to get even more worried when it comes to Hollywood Brown, a wide receiver that has not had 50 or more receiving yards since October 8th. Yes, that is horrendous. Going back to what we were looking at with those underdog pick'ems, well, maybe has not had a game with over 50 receiving yards since October 8th. If you look at the projections, they have Hollywood Brown at 53.5 receiving yards this week. The target share in this offense has still been there for Hollywood as the course of the season's gone on. He's had 86 total targets. The issue is the efficiency. He's just been a very inefficient wide receiver from a per target perspective, at least compared to what we've historically seen. But I think this should be much better with Kyler Murray coming back in based off the historical splits that we've had with and without Kyler Murray for Hollywood Brown. Now, I want to touch base on Cooper Kupp. I know we already talked about Cooper Kupp just a bit in our panicking video, but now that we've had a chance to see where he is falling down, and he is still falling in these flogfantasy.com community rankings, won't be surprised if he falls even further. I think that you can go out there and put a feeler to see what the price point would be for Cooper Kupp. This second of this recording, he's 37th overall, directly behind CJ Stroud, directly behind Adam Thielen, and directly in front of Justin Herbert and Devonta Smith. Now, if we are looking at Kupp, horrendous past month here. I mean, if we're going to go through and look at the past month, 29 receiving yards, 21 receiving yards, 48 and 11. Literally, it's laughably bad. But if we try to put some context to this, the game against Dallas, Matthew Stafford gets injured. The game against Green Bay, Matthew Stafford misses. The game against Seattle, Cooper Kupp misses. So while I 100% want to come out here and say, oh, okay, the story makes sense, right? The older wide receiver, 30 years old, that was dealing with an ankle injury coming into the season, now dealing with another injury to an ankle, and he's been horrible over the past month. There is a clear reason why Cooper Kupp should be discounted, and 100%, Cooper Kupp is not the player that you drafted him in round 1. If you did take him there, it's not going to work out. However, at this price point where we have Deepak, fantasy doctor on Twitter, coming out saying most wide receivers would return week 12 without performance hit or snap count limits, I don't know. I think that maybe there's a chance that we look back a month from now and go, oh, y'all remember when Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp got hurt and Kupp was being valued as a low-end wide receiver 2? And then he got healthy and all of a sudden he was a wide receiver 1 again. I think that is a possibility. So if I could buy Cooper Kupp at like a mid 4th round pick, early 5th round pick price tag, I think that's where he's probably going to settle in with these community rankings. I think he is worth the swing given the positive injury news that we have, even if it does come with some downside. Obviously, there is upside. But I think that's all I have for y'all in this video. If you enjoyed it, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And of course, if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the live chat, in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and that Christian McCaffrey special pick on more than less than half a total yard. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.